What is happening, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Florida Hockey Bros. My brother has been sick this week, so we couldn't record together, but we're going to record next week. So just a heads up that we're probably going to record a reaction to the Athletics rankings of front offices in the NHL. Obviously, the Panthers were ranked number one, but a lot of funny rankings. The Oilers and Leafs ranked pretty low. And so, yeah, we just want to have some fun with that and react to what we see in the rankings and what fan bases are saying about their own teams. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with that next week. So stay tuned for that. For now, I wanted to sort of break down something that I think is overlooked, which is the Florida Panthers prospects. They tend to rank pretty low when it comes to the draft pool for obvious reasons. They haven't had a lot of top picks necessarily lately. They have been focusing on winning now. And so Cito has given up a lot of top, first round picks, second round picks in order to get folks. But I actually think that the prospect pool for the Panthers is pretty solid. And I'm not going to get into all of the prospects, but I will break down the top 10 and why I think, all of these guys are actually really cool people to look into in terms of players that could turn into something. And so, yeah, if you're a Panthers fan, haven't heard of some of them, maybe I encourage you to look them up. And if you're not a Panthers fan, maybe you're interested in just kind of seeing that the Panthers sort of prospect pool may not be as bad as other people think. And it may help Cito keep the team as a contender for a long time to go. So getting right into it, my number 10 sort of prospect in the Panthers pool is Vladislav Lukashevich. He was a fourth-round pick, defenseman out of Russia 3 years ago. He was picked. He was actually ranked in terms of pre-draft in the 40 to 60th kind of spot for people, so sort of like a second-round defenseman. I think he dropped because he wasn't putting up a lot of points, even though he had a lot of upside with his skill. He ended up dropping to 120th, which is where Cito picked him. But the upside was there in terms of the skill. Then he spent 2 years in the minors in Russia and got better every year in terms of his point production. And then last year came to the U.S., was in the USHL, and was third among defensemen in the USHL in scoring. So he kind of broke out, was a plus player, went to the playoffs. And then this summer in development camp, he was talked about as the best defenseman out of the whole camp in terms of the prospects that the Panthers had there. So it is nice to see the guy developing in Russia, then coming over, putting up a lot of points and having kind of a breakout season, in the developmental league, and then coming to a camp and showing that he might have been maybe the best defenseman in the development camp. And now he's going to spend a year in college. He's going to Michigan State. So it's nice to see that he's going to get time to adapt. Potentially, probably after that, might get an ELC from the Panthers to go to the AHL for a season at least. But again, a lot of offensive upside, a guy who got picked in the fourth round that might have been a second-round talent and is starting to finally put up the points that everybody expected him to put based on his talent. So if this guy continues to develop, might just be a bit of a steal by Cito. But again, a little bit early, but a lot of signs already between camp and USHL, and then again, not having to rush him and let him play in college and maybe the AHL could be something for the Panthers. So yeah, keep an eye out for Lukashevich. Could be a cool defenseman. Number 9 for me is a guy that actually wasn't drafted at all, but is technically still a prospect, and Cito signed last year, is Ryan McAllister. So Ryan McAllister, what happened with him is that he had so like junior season, he was a late bloomer, wasn't picked. And the year after his draft eligibility, he had over 100 points in juniors, put up a bunch of goals, I think over 40 goals, and had a breakout season, basically. And, had he done that the year before, might have been picked in the top 2 rounds, but he didn't. And so because he had that breakout season, he ended up going to college to continue developing, and then finished 6th in scoring in the whole country, in the nation, in college, in hockey, obviously, last year, or I guess the season before. So he showed in back-to-back years between that junior season over 100 points and then a college season where he was top 6 in scoring in the whole country, not playing for a top team in college, that there was something there. So Cito went and signed him, put him in the AHL last season, and he was a rotation player because he was still kind of young, still had to earn his spot, and the Checkers had a deep team at that level. And he ended up playing in over 30 games, I think, put up 8 goals and over 15 points. But he showed a lot of talent. A lot of his one-timer is NHL level, great shot, great vision, excellent passer. He's known as a passer and as a setup man. He needs to work on the boards, needs to work on some of the two-way game and physicality. So I think he's going to be a starter in the AHL this year in his second year of the ELC. And I think he might be a top 6 player there. So we'll see. We'll see whether he's going to compete for a spot next season or whether he'll spend the last year of the ELC maybe again in the AHL, but still only, I think, 22 years old and kind of signed by Cito at 21. So yeah, a guy who wasn't drafted, but again, a prospect still developing, who had a breakout season in juniors after he went undrafted, great college season, and then the AHL has some signs of really being able to be sort of a smart, very skilled player, got played on the power play, even though he was only a rotation player. So yeah, I want to keep an eye on McAllister getting a full season, seeing if he takes that next step as he's done the last two years in college and juniors. So that's my number 9 guy. Number 8, I have Marek Alsher. He spent 3 years in juniors, I think. He was a 3rd-round pick by Cito a few years ago. He's a defensive defenseman, very physical, big guy. And even when he was drafted, they said that his skills defensively were already pro level. So he's kind of ready to play from a defensive perspective, maybe at a pro level. But he needs to develop a bit more his puck carrying skills, getting out of the zone. So I think he's going to spend maybe a year or 2 in the AHL working on that. But again, defensively, in terms of his puck gap, his ability to protect the boards, protect the front of the net, his size, his smarts as a defenseman, the top level. He was a huge plus player in juniors this season, got into the playoffs deep. And so Marek Alsher is a guy that I think a lot of people are high on because they feel like his floor is pretty high. Maybe the ceiling offensively is not as high, and that's why he was more of a 3rd-round pick. But for a pure defensive defenseman to be picked in the 3rd round by Cito, and some people had him ranked as a 2nd rounder, I think he might be that Mikko Mikkola type player, or maybe even Gudas type player that you can play in the middle to bottom pair, but you can rely on to be a shutdown guy when he has to be. So yeah, I think Alsher is a guy who's likely going to make the NHL. So I have him ranked number 8. Number 7, I have Josh Davies, a guy who's Panthers fans tend to know who he is. His nickname is Baby Lomberg. Small guy who's feisty, strong, hits people, fights a lot in juniors all the time. But what I like about Josh Davies, he was, I want to see if it was a 6th or 7th round pick. I think he was a 6th round pick. And what I really like about Josh Davies is that he, 6th round pick. So he broke out this season in juniors. He was at a pace of 50 goals, which for juniors players is like top 10, top 15 players. And he was in a 50 goal pace and then got injured, and that slowed him down. But he still ended up putting up a lot of points in juniors. And that was a surprise to a lot of people. Became an offensive player, a lot of skill, a lot of speed, in addition to the physicality, to having that Lomberg style of play. So he might be kind of like Lumber with more offensive upside, which would be, Lumber's, I think, a really good, solid 4th liner NHLer. So Davies could be that kind of a player, but maybe even a 3rd liner with his offensive skills. For a 6th round pick, not bad at all. He just signed an ELC, going to the minors, probably going to spend a year or 2 developing there to see if he can play and take the next step. But dude, it's a beast for a short guy. So yeah, I'm a lot of people are fans of Josh Davies, and the kind of guy you root for to see if he can make a team. And again, if you have him in your bottom 6 and he can fight, he can score, he can skate, that's the kind of guy you want. So yeah, I have him 7. Number 6, it's similar story, but more on the offensive side. Sandis Vilmanis. Vilmanis was a guy that people were high on skills wise. He was a 5th round pick because, again, not a ton of scoring, but his skills were there. He's out of Latvia, I believe, and Vilmanis has had good World Juniors tournaments. He's shown a lot of skills in the camps for the Panthers for the first couple of seasons after he was drafted. He's a very tall guy, great skater, great hands, great shot. But what's great about him is that he came over to the U.S. to play in the minors, had one pretty solid season in juniors, and then his 2nd season last year went off and scored a bunch of goals. Toward the end of the season, the last 30 games, he was a goal-a-game player, basically. And then in the playoffs, scored a bunch of points, was almost 2 points per game, scored 4 game-winning goals, and helped lead his team to the finals. So, he is to the conference finals, I should say, in juniors. And he just broke out, basically showed that he could be dominant. He's a clutch scorer. And then in the playoffs, played better than in the regular season. That's the Cito specialty of finding those kinds of guys who turn it on, right? Like Rodriguez and Bennett and all of that. So, and Lustrainen, those kinds of guys that really have value. So yeah, Vilmanis, big guy, scorer, great skater, great hands, signed an ELC, earned it. It's going to the minors, going to spend a year or 2 again developing there. But a lot of offensive upside, and I would say even more than Josh Davies. So that could be a guy that could be a middle 6 player on the wing who could be, kind of kind of a power forward with skill who can score. Again, you have to see how they develop, but he's been getting better. And that breakout season showed a lot of promise for a guy who had only been in the U.S. for a couple of years trying to learn American style. All right, so getting into the top five, I have Mike Banning at number 5. So Mike Banning, a lot of people are high on because after getting drafted in the 4th round, and he mostly dropped not because of skill and scoring, because he put a lot of scoring in juniors. And if you look at Mike Banning's career and look at his point production, you'll be surprised at how productive this guy was. You know, he had like Makar-like points in juniors, and then after he was drafted in the 4th round and he dropped because he's only 5'9", he's a very short guy for a defenseman. He had 2 seasons in college that were incredible. He was top scorer in terms of among defensemen and in terms of goal scoring, huge plus player, and then also a champion, and was the most valuable player in the Frozen tournament for Denver the year that they won. And I believe he scored the game-winning goal in the championship game and ran the power play. You know, smart guy, smart passer, you know, overcomes his lack of size. So anyway, got drafted for the 4th round, got to play in college, do all of that. And then last season, spent the entire season in the AHL, first year of his ELC, play every game, didn't miss a game, even though he's very small. And that was a concern. Can he handle the physicality of the pro game? Didn't miss a game. I think one of the few players for the Checkers that didn't miss a game. He scored 9 goals, which is pretty good for a defenseman. Was a plus player in a team that was not great defensively. And what I like most about Benning is that he played both on the right and the left. He was moved around the lineup in terms of what they needed based on injuries and matchups. He played with Lucas Carlson, who was the best defenseman for the Checkers. He was his pair, his line mate for a long time. I guess he's paired with him. And Carlson is very offensive, like all offense, like Morgan Riley type of. So Benning was trusted to be the two-way guy, and he held his own in that position. Played with Casey Fitzgerald, who's playing in the NHL. Played with Uvis Valinskis, who the Panthers are high on and are going to probably make the team this year. So and play on the power play as well. So I love that Benning showed that he could be resilient, physical, be a plus player in a pro league, not be a liability defensively as a small guy, durable, smart, 9 goals, play on the power play. I think he might need another year in the AHL to maybe continue to develop his physicality. Maybe becomes the 7th or 8th defenseman for the Panthers this season. But I am high on him, and I think a lot of people are. He just is smart. And he's a guy who just keeps fighting and playing. And he has skill. He has for a short guy, excellent shot. So, yeah, I think Mike Benning could be maybe a bottom pair puck moving guy who could be a backup for your power play. But again, for a 4th rounder, that would be excellent. And I'm still high on him. I think I watched him the whole season last year, and he looked really, really good to me. He anticipates really well in terms of protecting the blue line. So, yeah, Mike Benning is a top 5 for me. He might need another year, but he's a guy who could play in the NHL, I think. And then getting into the top 4, for me, I have Justin Sordeff as number 4. Sordeff, again, another guy who picked in the 3rd round, mainly, I think, because he could have put up a lot more points, but had a bit of injuries in juniors, and also was a captain in 2 different teams, Vancouver and Edmonton in juniors. Went deep both times with both teams in the playoffs in juniors. Went to the finals with Vancouver and lost in 7 games. Then won a cup, or a title, I should say, with Edmonton as a captain. Put up really solid points in the regular season and in the playoffs. 2-way player, physical, plays center. So because of that, he wasn't putting up like over 100 points, and he dropped to the 3rd round. But I think his skill level is 1st round. He's super fast, great hands, great shot, underrated shot, really smart player, physical, fights on the boards. And then my reason to have him number 4 is that he spent the last 2 seasons in the AHL, over 100 games combined, over 60 points scored, plus player, played on the first pair PK last year, was trusted to do that, trusted to be out there when they needed to protect the lead late in the game. 1st line center, played on the power play, played with Maggie Samoskevich. Spoiler alert, he's in the top, one of the top players, prospects for the Panthers, and became a leader at only 21, 22 years old last year. And he had already been a leader, but I mean at the AHL level. I think Sordeff is probably going to fight for a bottom 6 spot this season, and worse will be a first call-up player. And I think for me, he's a future guy that could be your third line, like Lustrianen, but with more speed and more skill offensively. I'm high on him. I think he's a leader. I think he's a great player. I think he can kill penalties. He can score. So, yeah, I have Sorda for number 4. I think he's a legit NHLer, and it's maybe a year or two away from becoming a regular. Number 3, I got Grayson Souching, more of a recent draft pick. From 2023, went back to juniors, had a really, really good season, got traded. And, in juniors, the trades are not because of how you're playing. It's just mostly what the teams are trying to, whether they're good, trying to win, or whether they're trying to tank. But Souching is also a guy who can play center, play wing, kill penalties, plays a physical style, even though small, goes to the net. Kachugas is like his model player. He reminds me of Marchand. And Paul Maurice was really high on him last season, saying that only 18, he was playing above his age, not afraid of physicality, got through the grueling camp super well, has incredible skill. The thing with Souching is that he plays a rounded game, but in a physical game, but his hands, go watch some of the highlights in juniors from Souching. He's got Huberdeau-like hands in terms of no-look passes. Like, he does like stuff that looks like a little bit like magic. So he's not Huberdeau, not saying that, but he's definitely more physical than Huberdeau ever was. And he's got that kind of level hand. So you combine those kinds of things, he could be a top 6, either center or winger for the Panthers. And I think he's going to spend a year in the AHL after his last junior season now. But I think he's 2 years away from trying to break in, and I'm very high on him. And people feel like as a second-round pick that he should have been a first-rounder based on his talent. Again, just not putting up a lot of points. And I think Cito likes to pick these guys that sacrifice scoring for the sake of physicality or defending or penalty killing, or whatever it is, or being a leader, like sort of like Souching. And something I should have clarified, I did not include guys from this year's draft because it's too recent, so I'm not going to put those guys in the rankings. I will sort of quickly stop there to say that Linus Eriksson, the second-round pick, reminds me of Souching in terms of the two-way play, but he's more like Lundell, like he can play two ways, had a breakout World Juniors, was a captain for Sweden in the World Juniors, a leader. So I'm high on Linus Eriksson, our second-round pick this year. I think he can. They're saying his floor is pretty high. He's definitely going to be an NHLer. The question is he going to center your third line, or is he going to center your first line? That's going to be the question with him. But that's a great question to have for a second-rounder. And then Matvei Shervin, defenseman, Nico Mikola, like 6'4", already, or 215, even though he's only 18, already playing in the pros in Russia. Defensive guy with better skating and hands, but everybody's saying his floor high. He's almost a sure NHLer. The question is he top forward shutdown guy, or is he a bottom pair guy, depending on how he evolves? But I'm just saying I'm high on him. And the last guy I'll mention is Simon Sether, who's a Swedish center. Stenlund-like, tall, great hands, can move, but probably with more upside offensively than Stenlund. The knock on him is that he's not super fast, not a great skater. But people said that he dominated in juniors for 2 years straight. He dominated his class completely. He was the captain of his under-20 team in Sweden, the leader, and then played the whole season last year and with the adult, like with the top league in Sweden. It's just that because he was playing the top league as an 18-year-old, he wasn't putting up a lot of points, so got picked in the fourth round in the draft by Cito. Some people had him in the second round. So anyway, those are the 3 guys from this year that I'm very excited about, that have very high floors, and then the ceilings will be depending on development. But I think all 3 of those guys have a potential of making the NHL. So smart picks by Cito, even though we have no first-round picks in the last 3 years. So getting back to the list, Souching, number 3, excellent skill, borderline guy that if he really reaches his potential could be borderline star. And then my top 2 are 2 guys that I think have the potential to become stars for real. Full-on stars. And number 2, I have Jack Devine. Jack Devine, 7th round pick, total steal already. Had a huge breakout season in college last year. Top player, top scorer, top 5 in goals. And won a championship for the second time with Denver. He was a teammate of Mike Benning, and the year that Benning was the most valuable player, and when they won. And then Devine was one of the leaders in Denver that won the title again a second year, and he's going back to college one last season instead of the AHL because he wants to play one more year and finish up his degree. But the dude has like star quality. It's like power forward, excellent skater, great hands, goes to the net, drives the net, great shot, smart. And because he started as a 7th rounder, he played more on the bottom lines, had to kill penalties, has been more of a two-way player. And if you look at his draft profile, they talk about his two-way play, maybe makes him like a bottom 6 player in the NHL. ironically, he has that foundation and that leadership and gotten a lot stronger and looked great in camp for the Panthers the last couple of years. But for some people, he's ready to turn pro. But yeah, he's going to do one more year of college, but tons of upside in terms of scoring and being a star. Has that star quality. So keep an eye out for Jack Devine. Might be one of the best deals ever if he ever breaks out as a 7th rounder. Which for Cito would fit his narrative of finding all these guys when no one else is looking. And then finally, number 1, you kind of have to give it to Maggie Samoskevich. I think Maggie, first-round pick, one of the few first-round picks the Panthers had on this Cito. I think Cito's only first-round pick. I don't think because Lundell, Cito was not around for that. He's developed Lundell, but he didn't pick him. He was there a few months. He got hired a few months after that draft. So Cito's only first-round pick. He hasn't had any first-round picks the last 3 seasons. So, Mackey, great college, seasoned after he got picked, scored the game-winning overtime goal to get his team into the Frozen Four. Michigan in college, excellent shot. He already in college had an NHL-level shot. Excellent skater, super fast, can get around defensemen. Kind of a small guy, needed time to develop. Last year made the team with Surdiff. That's another thing I should mention. Mackey and Surdiff made the Panthers team last year because of they earned it in the camp and preseason. They were excellent. They played a few games, and then Marie said, "We're trying to win a cup. Basically, these kids have to develop. I'm not going to play them a ton. They need to go to the AHL." And Mackey played on the first line with Surdiff, earned that spot. Over time, he became the top scorer for the Checkers, for the AHL, the Panthers AHL affiliate. Top goal scorer, top point getter, plus player. Even played some penalty kill minutes. Played on the power play. Just excellent, man. Excellent passer, excellent scorer. His numbers are comparable to like Jordan Kyrou and Rupert Hintz and Jason Robertson in the AHL at the same age. Like, go look that up. He's shown that he has the scoring potential of those guys. I'm not saying he's going to become those guys. He's not as big as some of those guys, but he has that ability at the same age to produce at that level between college and now the AHL. Still only 21, and he's slotted to be the third line right winger, take Tarasenko spot. He's a potential 20 to 30 goal scorer a year for the Panthers or in the NHL, given his skill level. And last year, he got stronger, he got faster, learned how to play more two ways. He actually was trusted to be out there to protect leads in the last minute when the other team was pulling the goalie. He was put in all those situations, which is what Maurice wanted to develop him. So he still got to work more on his two-way game, on his defensive game. That's probably going to be his biggest liability in the physicality in the NHL. But in terms of speed, hands, smarts, and now being able to have a full season in the AHL playing with a very physical league, and scoring in the AHL is hard. It's a very physical league. It's either people who make a living there or prospects who are trying to break out, trying to get called up. So it's incredibly intense every game. And he was the top scorer and just got better and stronger as the year went on. I watched him the whole season. By the end of the season, he looked like a different player. He looked like he could dominate. So very high on Maggie Samoskevich. So for now, I have to have him number 1. I'll say the Vine probably has more upside long-term to become like a bigger star. But until he can prove it, we won't know. With Mackey, I think he's sure to start to make an impact this season if he stays healthy. Playing with Lundell and Luostarinen on the third line, maybe even get to play a little bit with Barkov if there's an injury in the top 6. But yeah. So yeah, guys, that's the top 10 ranking. Let me know what you think. Do you know these guys? Do you know some of them? If not, I encourage you to look them up. I've done a lot of research. I followed most of them for the last few years. But again, Lukachevic number 10. I think Ryan McAllister number 9. Marek Alsher number 8. George Davis number 7. Sandis Romanis number 6. Mike Benny number 5. Justin Surdiff number 4. Grayson Sauching number 3. Jack Devine number 2. And Maggie Samoskevich number 1. And hopefully most, if not all of these names become, maybe not all with the Panthers, but NHL players in the future. They're all great, great players. And if only five of them break through for the Panthers, they're set for the next decade. All right, guys, let me know what you think. Keep supporting the Florida Hockey Bros. Leave a like, subscribe if you can. Trying to bring you content, trying to have some fun. And again, we'll react to the athletics list of the rankings of front offices next week and have some fun with that. So stay tuned. But yeah, thanks again for the support. And my brother and I will see you next week.